I was in Nigeria up until SS1 third term, SS2, and after that I moved to France where I did my A levels, and then after that I moved to England where I did my undergrad, and then my masters I did in America. And European culture is European culture, right? For me, it's actually quite interesting because I learned so much more about Africa outside Africa, right? Because in the education I had in secondary school, there wasn't really much focus on our history or the greatness that Africa was. It almost seemed more like propaganda history, that our history pretty much just started slightly before colonization, and everything else we've become is either our journey to independence and carrying on the system that we're left with, right? Fortunately, schooling abroad brought this Afrocentric idea into my consciousness. Books about researchers that showed our history that goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, Timbuktu, the Great Empire of Mali, learn about people like Mansa Musa, connecting migrations from what is present day Nigeria in the southwest up until the Nile Valley, and the different movements, migration patterns that happen between those two civilizations, right? Aside that, the governance, giving one a higher expectation of what one should expect from government, giving one a higher expectation of what democracy should be or what it should look like. Because you can't really operate outside of what you've been exposed to. You know, when the mind has been expanded, it cannot go back to its former size, right? And experiencing what quality education is like, experiencing what good governance is like, experiencing a health system that works, a health system that is checking on people before they get sick because they know that on the long run that will keep the cost of healthcare coverage lower. Preventative medicine as opposed to constantly solving problems as they're happening. Understanding the value of data, data-driven policy, and how all these come together to create a system that works and that people can thrive in. Understanding the value of people paying taxes, right? And the services they get in return of those taxes. I think these are some of the things that I got from my exposure schooling abroad. And then when I moved back to Nigeria, I did my NYC, and then I started working. I worked in some architecture firms while also running mine and getting some projects, and then went into business. And then when I wanted to go into politics, after leading a GMO campaign alongside other notable patriotic Nigerians, I decided that, experiencing leading a 2,000-man march on the Senate and understanding how they responded to us, which in my opinion did not show people that actually prioritize the well-being of their people, I felt that it's important to go into politics. Okay, so I ran for student council president in high school and won. So politics that way, yeah, you can say since I was 19, having an idea, having the manifesto and selling that idea, understanding problems and proffering solutions and implementation strategies. Yeah, so I can say 18, 19. When I came back and after the GMO, for those that don't know, genetic modified foods, we led a 2-year campaign against the Ministry of Agriculture that was chaired at the time by Akinwumi Adesina to prevent the adoption of genetic modified foods in Nigeria. And that process, engaging on politicians and our representatives, I felt that Nigerians deserve better. And I'm not one to just complain and point fingers or tweet on social media. I believe if you engage in something, you need to see it all the way. So I ran for local government chairman. But before that, I actually went to Unilag and got a master's in research and public policy. Now, I had some very brilliant professors without a doubt, some very, very brilliant professors. People like Professor Jikutu, people like Professor Logbenla, Onoha, a number of very brilliant people. But at the same time, in relation to the level of organization, there's still a way to go, and I think this also comes down to funding our universities properly, ensuring that our professors are well paid, ensuring that we have enough professors, because a lot of our professors, they are taking so many classes with so many students, and they have to bring in their A game to all of these things. We need to prioritize education a lot more in this country. Nigerians are some of the most brilliant human beings in this world. Brilliant. And I'm talking, I just named 3 different countries that have operated in terms of education. And then there are some other 4 countries that have done work in and I currently have interest in. And Nigerians are there and they are doing wonderful things, right? So we're an intelligent group of people. What we need are the structures and organization that create an enabling environment for us to thrive. I mean, think about what it takes to be successful in this country today. Think about what it takes to be successful in Lagos. Now, imagine a government that puts everything in place and is more like a partner than, this person that's just trying to take from me, right? You would experience an exponential increase in wealth. I think that a person that values education must have had a very good education. If you don't value education, it's a reflection of your own education. I can't think of somebody that's experienced good education that will not prioritize education, because you will know the power of education. And this goes to show when we talk about how it's okay for someone with a NEPA certificate to be our president, and we see the ruin that it brought Nigeria to, or a person that's using lawyers to hide his certificates, right? It will reflect in the quality of your education. So I feel that we need to start demanding more from people that aspire to lead us. Go and look at the quality of education that the leaders of America got. They either went to Yale or Harvard or recently Princeton, Ivy League schools. The top of us have to lead. This idea that you can just pick anybody to lead you to where? This person is like this with you. Where is he leading you to? What vision is this person bringing that is outstanding? Your leader should be outstanding. He cannot be, or she cannot be, part of the flock. You understand? They must be outstanding, either in their strength of character. So you look at America when they want to select their president, George Washington. Why? Because when there was war, the man stood in front. He was a leader. Intelligence, he was a leader. These were people that were inventors. Benjamin Franklin. These were people that were inventing things. They were not just thought leaders. They were on ground. They were policy leaders. They were kings in their own right. It was not a commoner. And I don't mean commoner in the sense of money. You see, people think it's just about money. No, it's about what are your values? What are you willing to stand for? What do you stand for? Right? If the wind blows, you just move to the place that favors your pocket. You clearly don't have a backbone. So how can you lead? And people will say, okay, they just want somebody that they can associate with. Yes, but associate with in what way? In poverty and failure and mediocrity, or in success and a vision that will benefit you, your family, and your children, and the greater society, right? Because if you think about it, I say this thing in most interviews I do. My father tells me that his father told him that Nigeria was better in his day. My father told me Nigeria was better in his day. My father graduated, there were jobs, you could get car. Like, only the man had to work, the wife could be a housewife, and they were comfortable. They did not need to steal, to travel, to go on holiday. Right? He came into that. Quality education. There was public education. Right? His father was a judge. His father's driver could send his child to the same school as his boss's son. And they got quality education. Now, I can tell my children that I remember a time when Nigeria was better. When I would change 1 million naira and get 4,000 pounds. I can barely get 1 million naira now with 500 pounds. Do you understand? So it's perpetually in a nosedive. And why is that? Lack of continuity in quality leadership and visionary leadership, right? No leader that is truly focused on creating a Nigerian identity that celebrates our uniqueness and our differences and sees that as a resource as opposed to something that divides us, right? People that are traveling to the UAE, they are going there to enjoy the culture. And this culture is old, it's ancient, but they've repackaged it. That makes people want to come and visit, want to come and spend their hard-earned money there, right? And this is the visionary type of ideas I'm talking about that will create jobs, right? Well, it's a very interesting one. I grew up in a Nigeria where I went to ISL, and speaking traditional languages was called, there's a word for it, starts with C, not vernacular, there was something else. There's another word, it starts with a C. You could not do that. It was against the school rules, right? And you get punished for that. And then even at the time, there was this whole idea of this person, this is local. Like young people, I remember young people saying that is local. The people were not interested with identifying with Nigerian music. Then it was hip hop, it was about Biggie, Puff Daddy, international music. I'm sure I'm betraying my age now. Well, my age is not 80 now, 42. But I'm talking about the time where nobody was wearing trad. We grew up seeing our parents wearing suits, trousers and shirts, And like I said, I don't feel that the education that we got in Nigeria really laid any foundation for you to look deeper into our history, into our culture. And I know this now because I've experienced education elsewhere. And I know how the British lay emphasis on their history. So that even if you're an art student or a science student, you had an in-depth knowledge of the history of your people. And this history is not just a linear one. It's one that is connecting different events and moments and always trying to show your people to be great, right? So you see the British will hide the idea of the part they played in slavery and enslavement. It will not be prominent in the history, but where they conquered or where they uprooted slavery from the African continent, the role they played in doing that will be highlighted, right? That is curated. Now you might say that's not right, it's not fair, but they're programming their citizenry. And that is what a thinking government will prioritize. Same thing with America, right? So I don't really feel we had that in our education system. But then there was an Afrocentric awakening that happened later on. And this had also happened earlier. The kind of thinking that informed people like Nnamdi Azikiwe when he traveled to America, the kind of thinking that informed Fela Anikulapo Kuti when he traveled to America, or even to England, where he met Afro-British people that knew the histories of Africa, that awoken that idea in him, in Fela, in Nnamdi Azikiwe, in a number of Africans, in Kwame Nkrumah, right? They didn't get it at home, they got it elsewhere, and they came and they brought that, we are African, we are great, black is beautiful, And when you open that doorway, it then starts to lead you into understanding your culture more, understanding the depth of it. You see, and it's not our fault, right? We're conquered. Our kings were removed. At least the kings that had the courage to fight, they were removed. They were exiled. Some were killed. Our people were kidnapped. With the collaboration of some Africans, our people were kidnapped and sold. Some of the strongest men were kidnapped and sold. So you have diaspora cousins and everybody outside of the country. The few that were saved, were brought back. But you now had a situation of religion. And unfortunately, the religion that came through in partnership with colonization pretty much said to us that everything that we were before them was bad, was evil, was demonic. So you have a people that claim that they are from a certain tribe, speak the language, but the depth of the thinking they associate with being evil. So there's still a significant level of identity crisis that we struggle with. And you don't really see that with Indians who were colonized by the British. You don't really see it with the Chinese who also dealt with their own level of colonization, nor the Japanese, right? And you see, understanding your identity or crafting your identity as a people, because China, as we're seeing it today, was not just monolithic. It was not just one group of people. There are huge, different groups of people all over China, different tribes, but they were united by a visionary king. Similar thing happened in Japan, right? Similar thing happened in England, right? In England, you had part in what you call England, or what was Great Britain or England at the point. You had the Welsh, you had the Scottish, you had the Irish, right? And they were united at the point by a conqueror, right? So sometimes you also craft identity. Sometimes identity is created by facing a threat that is bigger than all of you independently. So you have to come together to face that. And sometimes it's just visionary leadership, right? You see visionary leadership in Singapore with Lee Kuan Yew. We saw that creates an identity that you can be proud of. Like there is no China man now, or even if there will be very few that will not be proud of China and not want to be associated with the bigger identity of China as opposed to their identity as a tribe, because China is so great and it pays you to be associated with it. It is when there's a failure in that bigger identity that people recoil back to their smaller identity, right? And that's what you find going on in a lot of places. But all in all, yeah. I think the government, you see, what has happened is because we've had governments or politicians that don't really have a vision to sell, they rely on selling division. Because the classic divide and rule strategy. If you have a vision, you want to sell a vision and unite people. Visions unite people, right? So you sell a vision, so people unite behind the vision. When you don't have a vision, so you sell the vision so that people can be separated. When you separate people, it's easier to rule over them. And you see that has happened significantly from the last election, right? And you then see in how the government has ruled this country. Significant nepotism, significant levels of corruption, significant levels of lack of transparency or accountability. You see that the government is very extractive without really paying any attention to being accountable to the people they want to extract from. You see that they talk about stopping subsidy payments. And there was a hope that those monies that would have otherwise been used for subsidies would have been put to make life easier for the Nigerian. Life is not easier for the Nigerian. Inflation rates are at an all-time high, right? Insecurity is at an all-time high. For the first time in decades, we're having a foreign country bombing our land, our territory, which is an indictment on the failure of our security system. And you think about how much money is spent on these things, on our army, on our military, that goes unaccounted for. And you see how corruption is rewarded by ambassadorial appointments. So there's a lot of politicking as opposed to governance. And it is in quality governance, creating excellence in governance, where you are moving away from personalities to institutions. And people are now normalizing an excellent standard of service, right? So it's no more about the personality, it's about the quality of governance. Once that starts to be ticked, right, people will start to embrace the idea of Nigeria. When Nigeria is playing football, nobody is saying that man is from this tribe, this person is from this tribe, especially if we are doing well. Everybody wants to be associated with that greatness that is Nigeria. When I finished school, I'm telling you, I went to a school where you did not have to leave the school to get the best jobs. Those companies came to do interview on campus. And I'm saying that myself and all my friends that were Nigerian were rushing to move back to Nigeria. It's not that we did not have the jobs or the potential jobs. We were so excited about Nigeria at the time under President Obasanjo, what he had achieved, the quality of his governance, the quality of his ministers, that there was a significant fear of missing out. And so many people, and I tell this to young people today, that there was a time where people were rushing back from countries like America, from England, and they can't imagine it, So it's about creating good governance, creating excellence in governance. And everybody wants to be associated with success and greatness. There was a time where we had governments that were very empathetic to the common man. They were welfarist to an extent. Governments like Alhaji Lateef Jakonde. And that was really the ideology of Obafemi Awolowo. It was very welfarist. So civil servants did not have to hustle for housing. They had quality housing in prime areas. Affordable housing was a priority. It was prioritizing the people that were the middle class, that were the working class. That is the role of government. But you find that now government is more fixated on producing properties or being involved in properties for the rich. Whether it is how they are allocating land, whether it is in how they are sand filling. I mean, how many Nigerians can afford to live at Eko Atlantic? I read this year where they were proudly talking about how they are sand filling and reclaiming land in some parts of Lagos for housing. By the time you've done all of that, your unit cost will be so significant that no average person will be able to afford to live there. Meanwhile, we have huge tracts of land in Ojo, Amuwo, Badagry, Ikorodu, Epe, Ibeju-Lekki that we can channel proper urban planning, bring in industries there, and focus on creating infrastructure that makes people want to live there. And then creating local governments that are independent in themselves. So most of the major services you need are in there. So nobody is going from Ikeja to Yaba for school. These are things that cause traffic. It's like the boroughs in London. You cannot even get into a borough outside of where you pay your council tax. Why? Because your taxes are used to fund the schools in that community. So it's a direct correlation. So your child can get into schools in the immediate vicinity of where you live. And that local council is doing their best to create affordable housing, council flat, and unemployment benefits, things like that, from the taxes. You understand? And that's what is missing significantly here. You've talked about flooding. Flooding is tied to our drainage systems and it's tied to our waste disposal systems and waste management systems, right? That in itself is also tied to the traffic that we have, especially in rainy season. It's also tied to traffic outside of rainy season because if your water is not draining properly, it's destroying your roads. That's how we then get potholes. That also causes traffic. That also spoils cars, which then leads to cars breaking down the road, which then leads to traffic. So it's an entire holistic system that must be solved in a holistic way. And there's a famous saying that you can never solve a problem from the same headspace or mindset in which that problem was created. You must step out of it to solve that problem. So this problem must be solved in holistic way. Why are our gutters still open? All these our elites, they're not even elite. Our politicians, our political leaders, they travel abroad. Shiba, our president, has gone to, I think he's gone somewhere to Europe and then the Middle East. I'm sure he's not seeing open gutters when he goes to Dubai, right? Or England or France, right? I'm sure he knows of the proper draining systems in these places, right? So we need to do better as a people. I even think it's wrong to use Lagos as a mirror. You cannot compare Lagos to any other state in this country. Lagos, first, was the water-facing arm for the Benin Empire at a point, which was very powerful at a point. It was, aside from the Awori and children of Olofin that came and settled it, the monarchy was from Benin. And it was a water-facing arm of the Benin Empire. Then Lagos then received all the influx of Europeans that came in for colonization. Lagos was the port in which Nigeria was formed. There was a time where all politics in Nigeria happened in Lagos. Everybody from all over came to Lagos. Think about the level of exposure. Think about the level of development from back then. Think about the level of commerce, level of finance from back then. Then you now had influx of returnees that had either paid for their freedom or people that were saved, that were never enslaved and got education in Sierra Leone because that was where the first secondary school was and came back. I'm talking about people like Samajai Crowder, grandfather of Herbert Macaulay, Henry Carr, H.O. Davis, and so many others that literally laid the foundation for the freedom and independence that we then got later on. Think about the intellectual capital that came in here. Think about all the skill sets that came into Lagos, the buildings that were built, the level of development, the amount of resource that came into Lagos with that. Then after that, Lagos then became this capital. Think about all the investments that came with that, all the infrastructure that was created by the Nigerian state before it now relocated to Abuja. And then today, Lagos is now the commercial capital. Most companies that exist in this country have their headquarters here. So it's extremely unfair to compare. Lagos State it's like that child that has been blessed and blessed and blessed. You know, it's like all the other children were on the farm and all the prophets were just coming and blessing and blessing and blessing. It's not fair to compare Lagos to any other state. It cannot be compared. But yes, that's the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the extreme need for infrastructure, right? Which, I mean, we have huge IGR because of the human beings that are here. So those money should be put into creating infrastructure for them to have a beautiful quality of life, to be more productive, to be able to earn more, which would then increase the IGR that Lagos generates, right? You know, so it's all tied into each other. Well, first of all, it's not a thing that's unique to me. You know, the APC Lagos, especially, the APC Lagos arm of politics is bigotry. Is based on bigotry. I mean, there's still pictures of banners that were hung of Jimmy Agbaje being called Jimmy Chukwu, governor of the Southeast. This is a man that is blue blood from Ikorodu. We know his grandfather, we know his antecedents, we know what he did. This is not somebody that his history or his pedigree or his name or his age or his sex is under question or under any kind of controversy. We know him. We know his grandfather. We know his father. We know his family. Right? And this is what they did. So anybody that seemingly rises to challenge the Tinubu hegemony, the first thing that is challenged is your Yorubaness. Right? I remember when they were saying that even somebody like Padi Banjo, the reason why he supported Peter Obi or was anti-Tinubu was because his mother was Igbo. Or they said Obasanjo's father is this. Anytime somebody challenges the Tinubu hegemony, they attack your identity. They try to strip you of your Yorubaness. In my situation, unfortunately for them, they could not challenge my family. They could not challenge our history. There are all sorts of nonsense. But I give God the glory that my parents are alive. I give God the glory that my family has a very good habit of keeping records, all the way to newspaper articles from the 1800s. So imagine if one did not have that. Imagine if one's parents were not alive and these people just came together with this propaganda. You start questioning, what's really going on? But thank God, I come from a family that history has written a lot about. So we know who we are. And as Lagosians, Amorawa, we know ourselves. Because one is in politics now, there are a lot more things that people are saying about me. But I've been Afrocentric for a very long time. All you need to do is go and read my blogs. I still have a blog under if you search for it, the Hopeful Nigerian. And I've been advocating for history to return back to our schools, our traditions, our culture. The idea that no, not everything that existed before the Rainbow Man came here was bad. Right? There's bad in everything. There are people that call themselves Muslims that are killing people. There are people that were calling themselves Christian that were doing crusades and massacring people. I mean, for goodness sake, the first slave ship that came to Africa was called Jesus. The Pope blessed people that were going to go and kill indigenous people all over the world. So there are good and bad people in every culture, in every belief system, right? And this idea that everything that we were before Christianity or any of the major religions means that we are bad. I've been against that for decades, right? And that's not common. That's not common in this part of the world. And I know the backlash that I got for that, but I'm somebody that fortunately I can afford to live my truth, I can afford to do that. So what you saw is just me on my journey. A lot has been consistent. It's just now it is obvious. People are seeing it. It's in people's faces. And I'm coming of age. I'm growing. My first title was the Obalefon of Lagos that I got from the Obatala Temple in Ife. Right? And that ties into my belief system that, there is an African spiritual science, right? The entire binary code in which we build our computers is based on African traditional science, right? The understanding of time not being linear, but being circular and intertwining, right? These are things that quantum physics is proving, right? So you find that we have known things from time that science, Western science, is just interpreting and bringing to common knowledge now, right? And that is something that I will grow in. And as some will say, your head calls certain things to you. So that title is something that I embrace because it's something that I've understood and it's something I value. It's very important to me. And then also I am the Are of Igbalekoka, which is the house that was headed by Justice Koka. He was the Olori Eyo at a point, and Baba Isale of Lagos. So those are the titles that I have, that I got recently. As relates to Yoruba titles, I also have an Igbo title, Ochiaga of Ndibo in Lagos State. Aside that, I was initiated into the Awe Adimu, and as a son of Lagos, these are things that we hold very dear to us. I mean, you've been around my house, I'm sure you've seen plenty of your paintings. And if you go into any indigenous house, most of them, you see something Eyo. It will just be there, right? Either it's the Okwan Bata and the hat, or a sculpture, or something, because it symbolizes our heritage, our ancestral culture. It's our day to show, who we are as a people, because Lagos, like I said, is a cosmopolitan port. So sometimes our identity gets lost. And there are always different groups that, it's almost like when you talk about the history of Lagos, it's somehow covered by the history of Nigeria, because so much of the history of Nigeria happened in Lagos. But we have our own history, a very rich history, with a lot of intrigues, right? And Eyo Festival is for Lagos Island, a way of showing our uniqueness, our heritage, our culture. And that is not to say that it's only limited to Lagos Island. We have brothers that were coming Ikorodu, coming from Ekpe, coming from Badagry, and then all of these places also have their own rich culture and heritage. Like the Zangbeto Festival in Badagry is amazing. I cannot wait for it to be properly mainstream, for the government to actually bring it into mainstream culture. You also have the masquerades in Ekpe, in Ikorodu, masquerades all over the mainland, all that Ikeja, Ifakojai area, they have that culture there as well. These things need to be mainstreamed. They need to be brought into and repackaged, right? The tradition itself, the masquerades, the pageantry is beautiful, it's perfect. It's now the environment at which it operates, right? We need to create the environment that will pull tourists in, make them feel safe, make them feel comfortable, clean environments, right? That can now create these things with world-renowned cultural experiences that people fly in because they want to come and see. Think about the Brazilian carnival, right? Things like that. We want people to fly in because this is how you generate income for those communities, and also puts us on that world map. 2025 was a very difficult year for a lot of people. 2024 was difficult because that was the first shock. But 2025 has not been easy at all. A lot of companies have laid off staff, right? Things are extremely expensive. Go and ask anybody that's about to pay their rent. They've seen their rents double. People that rented a place for 3 million are now looking at paying 8 million, right? People that got a place for 500,000 are now looking at 1.5, right? I have to acknowledge that there is a new bill that's passed in the State Assembly that is pushing for monthly payments of salaries that's protecting tenants, and I think that's a very, very good thing. Implementation of it, our laws are not the problem, it's the implementation of it.